In the year 1830, in the wild and untamed lands not far from what is now the bustling city of Cincinnati, there stretched a vast and shadowy forest, an expanse of towering trees that seemed to go on forever. This wilderness was dense, untouched, and unbroken, a place where the hand of man had made little mark. The trees stood like ancient sentinels, their thick trunks rising high into the sky, their leafy canopies forming a roof so dense that only slivers of sunlight managed to pierce through during the day. Below, the undergrowth was thick with tangled vines, thorny bushes, and moss-covered rocks, creating an almost impenetrable barrier in some places. The air was rich with the scent of pine and damp earth, a mixture of the fresh, sharp aroma of evergreens and the deep, loamy fragrance of decaying leaves. It was the kind of air that felt heavy in the lungs, filled with the life and death of the forest itself. Sounds were sparse, swallowed by the thick, muffling embrace of the woods. The rustling of leaves, stirred by an unseen breeze, whispered in the distance, while now and then the eerie call of a lone bird echoed through the trees. Sometimes a distant branch cracked under the weight of an unseen creature, a reminder that the forest was home to more than just trees. This was a place where nature reigned supreme, where the presence of man was an intrusion, fleeting and insignificant in the grand, endless march of time. Only a few settlers lived there, restless pioneers who built homes, only to abandon them and push farther west in search of something more. They were a peculiar kind of people, unable to settle in one place for long, always seeking new frontiers, despite the hardships they knew awaited them. The forest seemed to reject civilization, swallowing up all signs of human life as soon as they were left untended. Many who had first settled there had already moved on, leaving behind empty cabins and untamed land. But one man remained. His name was Murlock, and he had been one of the first to settle there. Unlike the others, he did not leave. Instead, he lived alone in a small log cabin, surrounded by the endless woods. He was a man of few words, rarely speaking unless necessary, and never smiling. No one knew much about him. He made his living by selling animal skins in a nearby river town, but never farmed the land around his home. The ground near the cabin had once been cleared, but the forest had reclaimed it over time. It was as if Murlock had lost the will to resist, surrendering to the inevitable return of the wild. The cabin itself was simple, a structure of rough logs, a chimney of sticks, a wooden roof weighed down with poles, and a single door. There was a window too, but it was boarded up. No one knew why. It had always been that way, for as long as anyone could remember. He was not afraid of light. He was often seen sitting outside on sunny days, staring into the trees as if searching for something he had lost. The secret of that window had been forgotten by most, but my grandfather knew the truth, and now so will you. Murlock was not old, though he looked it. He was about 50, but his hair and beard were white, his eyes dull and sunken, his face deeply lined. He was tall but thin, with hunched shoulders, as if he carried an invisible burden. His clothes, though functional, were worn thin, patched many times over, and covered in the dust of the forest. He moved slowly, deliberately, like a man for whom each step was a reminder of the weight of time. I never met him, but my grandfather told me his story when I was young. One day, Murlock was found dead in his cabin. There were no coroners in those days, no newspapers to report his passing. People simply accepted that he had died, likely of natural causes. They buried him near his cabin, beside the grave of his wife. She had died so long before that few even remembered she had existed. That should have been the end of Murlock's story, but it wasn't. There was more, something my grandfather told me, something that had happened many years before. When Murlock first arrived, He was young and full of hope. He built his cabin with his own hands and began clearing land for a farm. His rifle provided food, and he worked hard to carve out a life in the wilderness. He was not alone. He had a wife, a woman who was strong and kind, willing to endure the hardships of frontier life at his side. No one remembers her name or what she looked like, but there is no doubt that they loved each other. And when she died, something inside him died too. He never left the place where they had built their life together. It was as if he could not bring himself to move on. One day, after a long hunt in the forest, Murlock returned home to find his wife burning with fever. She was delirious, muttering words he could not understand. Her skin was clammy, her breathing shallow. There was no doctor for miles, no neighbor to fetch for help. He did what he could, cooling her forehead, giving her water. But nothing worked. The fever consumed her, burning away the life in her eyes. On the third day, she fell into unconsciousness and never woke again. Murlock stood over her body, numb with grief. He had never lost someone before. He had no idea how to handle the weight of it. But he knew one thing. She had to be buried. That was the way of things. So, he set about preparing her for burial. His hands moved mechanically, performing the tasks as if in a trance. He adjusted her hair, straightened her dress. Sometimes he did things incorrectly and had to start over. Other times, he repeated the same actions more than once, forgetting he had already done them. He was not crying. He was not even sure why. Tomorrow, he told himself, I will make the coffin and dig the grave. Then I will miss her. But for now, it is all right. It has to be. As the sun set, he sat at the table beside her body, exhausted. He looked at her pale face in the dim light, feeling an odd certainty that she was not truly gone. His grief was too large, too unfamiliar for him to understand. Eventually, his body gave into weariness. He laid his head on his arms and fell asleep. A sound woke him. A cry. It came from the woods outside, a long, wailing call like that of a lost child. Murlock did not stir. The cry came again, this time closer. Still, he slept on. Then, in the middle of the night, he woke suddenly. The cabin was dark, so dark he could see nothing. But he sensed something was wrong. He listened, every muscle tensed. The air felt heavy, thick with silence. Then, the table shook beneath him. A moment later, he heard something else. Soft footsteps. Bare feet moving across the wooden floor. Fear gripped him, holding him still. He wanted to call his wife's name, but his throat would not make a sound. He wanted to reach out to touch her, to be sure she was still there, but his arms would not move. Then, something heavy crashed against the table, nearly knocking him over. A violent thud followed, shaking the entire cabin. A struggle broke out in the darkness, a confusion of sounds he could not make sense of. Then, finally, he snapped out of his fear. His hands fumbled against the wall until they found his rifle. He raised it, aimed blindly, and fired. For a brief moment, the cabin was illuminated by the flash of gunpowder. And in that instant, he saw it, a massive panther dragging his wife's body toward the window. Its teeth were buried in her throat. Then, darkness returned. Silence followed. When Murlock awoke, it was morning. The birds were singing outside. The cabin was still. He sat motionless for a long time before he turned to look at his wife. Her body lay near the window where the panther had dropped it. Her dress was torn, her hair in disarray. Blood pooled from her throat. Her hands were clenched into fists, the ribbon that had tied her wrists now broken. And between her teeth, she held a torn piece of the panther's ear. Even in death, she had fought back. Murlock never left the cabin after that. He lived on for many years, But he was never the same. He never boarded up the window, but no one ever saw him open it either. He never spoke of that night, never told anyone what had happened. But those who passed by his lonely cabin said they could still hear the cries in the night, the wailing sound of something lost in the dark woods. And so he remained, trapped in a place where the past and present blurred together, where love and loss had woven themselves into the very air he breathed. Until, at last, the forest reclaimed him too.